She was called the golden child of the Trump dynasty, the one who could do no wrong. Elegant, perfectly poised, and seemingly untouchable, Ivanka Trump stood at the intersection of business, politics, and celebrity. For years, she was more than just Donald Trump's daughter. She became a brand, a symbol of glamour and influence. But behind the flawless photo shoots and public smiles, a different story was unfolding, one that most Americans never saw and perhaps were never meant to see. Ivanka wasn't just a businesswoman, and she wasn't just a political figure. She was a strategic player in a game that reached far beyond what the public imagined. As cameras followed her every move during her father's presidency, Ivanka cultivated an image of calm, diplomacy, and intelligence. To some, she was the moderating voice in a chaotic White House. To others, she was the ultimate opportunist, leveraging her father's power to build her own empire. But the truth, as always, is far more complicated. What if I told you that Ivanka's carefully curated life wasn't as flawless as it appeared? That behind the polished speeches and picture-perfect family moments lay a series of calculated decisions, controversies, and connections that would eventually change the course of her future. This isn't just the story of a privileged heiress who stepped into the political spotlight. This is the story of how Ivanka Trump became one of the most powerful and polarizing figures in America, and how the choices she made behind closed doors continue to shape her reputation today. We're going to uncover how she rose from a teenage model to a senior advisor in the White House, the secrets behind her business empire, and the hidden alliances that many believe could come back to haunt her. Because to understand Ivanka Trump, you can't just look at the perfect Instagram photos or glossy magazine covers. You have to look at the deals made in the shadows, the friendships that came with a price, and the loyalty tests that left even family members questioning her motives. And by the time we're done, you might never look at Ivanka the same way again. Ivanka Trump was born into a world of gold-plated elevators and million-dollar views. From the very beginning, she was surrounded by power, wealth, and the unspoken expectation that she would one day carry the Trump legacy further than anyone before her. Growing up in Manhattan's Trump Tower, Ivanka was never just another child. She was a name, a brand, and whether she knew it or not, a tool in the empire her father was building. Her early years were marked by privilege, but also by tension. Donald and Ivanka Trump's highly publicized divorce played out like a soap opera in the tabloids, leaving young Ivanka to navigate a family split under the harsh glare of the media. Some say that it was this moment, watching her parents fight over fortunes and headlines, that forged Ivanka's ability to stay composed no matter the chaos around her. Even then, she seemed to understand that appearances were everything, and she mastered the art of controlling hers. But behind the glossy photos of a seemingly perfect childhood, whispers about the true dynamics of the Trump family began to circulate. Donald Trump was a larger-than-life figure, demanding and often unpredictable. Those who knew the family claimed that Ivanka learned early on how to win his approval, through loyalty, through charm, and through aligning herself with his ambitions. It was a skill that would serve her well later, as she climbed higher into the heart of the Trump organization and eventually the White House. Ivanka's childhood wasn't just about private schools and penthouses. She was being molded, consciously or not, into someone who could handle the spotlight, wield influence, and navigate the brutal world of Trump-level business and politics. Former insiders have suggested that from a young age, Ivanka understood that nothing in the Trump universe came without strings attached. Every favor, every opportunity, every compliment carried an expectation in return. And yet, even as a teenager, she exuded a kind of quiet control that set her apart from her siblings. While Donald Jr. and Eric were often portrayed as louder and more aggressive, Ivanka played the long game. She kept her emotions in check, building relationships and earning trust where others might have burned bridges. This ability to read the room and anticipate the moves of those around her would later become one of her most powerful weapons. But who was guiding Ivanka during those formative years? There are rumors never confirmed, but impossible to ignore, that certain influential figures outside the family took an interest in shaping her future. Mentors from the business world, socialites who saw her as the perfect protégé, and even political donors who recognized her potential as a future power player. What exactly they expected from her remains a mystery, but one thing is certain: Ivanka Trump was never just a child of privilege. She was being prepared for something much bigger, and those preparations would lead her to places few could have predicted. By the time Ivanka Trump stepped into the world of higher education, she was already more than a famous last name. She had become a figure that people in New York society watched carefully, some with admiration, others with envy, and a few with the quiet suspicion that there was more to her story than anyone was allowed to see. Ivanka first attended Georgetown University before transferring to the prestigious Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania, the same institution her father had graduated from decades earlier. To the outside world, this seemed like a natural continuation of the Trump legacy, the golden daughter following in the footsteps of the family patriarch. But behind closed doors, there were whispers that her enrollment was not just about education. Some former classmates have suggested that Ivanka was networking as much as she was studying, building relationships with people whose last names carried just as much weight as her own. During this time, she also dipped her toes into modeling, appearing on magazine covers and walking in fashion shows. While many dismissed it as a hobby, insiders say it was far from accidental. Modeling gave Ivanka something money couldn't buy: her own public identity, separate from the shadow of Donald Trump. It also gave her access to powerful people in the fashion and entertainment industries, connections that would later prove invaluable. But Ivanka's early career was not without controversy. Questions arose about how much of her success was earned and how much was handed to her. There were rumors of deals quietly arranged by the Trump Organization to ensure she stayed in the spotlight, from lucrative modeling gigs to speaking opportunities at high-profile events. And there were moments when Ivanka's polished image nearly cracked. Those who were around her at the time recall how carefully she measured every word, every appearance, and every social connection. It wasn't just about building a resume, it was about crafting a persona, one that could withstand scrutiny and one day stand on its own. After graduation, Ivanka officially joined the Trump Organization. It was a move that surprised no one, but it immediately positioned her at the center of the family empire. And here's where things became more complicated. Within the Trump Organization, Ivanka was not just the boss's daughter, she was a rival to anyone who stood in her way. Former executives have spoken about the subtle power plays she engaged in, using charm when it worked and icy detachment when it didn't. She knew who to befriend, who to outmaneuver, and who to quietly push aside. What few realized at the time was that Ivanka was playing a longer game than anyone suspected. She wasn't content to simply inherit her father's business. Those close to her believed she wanted something bigger, influence that extended beyond real estate, beyond New York, and maybe even beyond the United States. The question that lingered then and still lingers was how far Ivanka Trump was willing to go to get it. When Ivanka Trump officially entered the Trump Organization, she didn't just step into an office, she stepped into the epicenter of her father's empire. Donald Trump had built the company into a global brand synonymous with luxury, ambition, and controversy, and he expected nothing less than absolute loyalty from everyone around him. But Ivanka was not like the other executives. She was his daughter, his protégé, and in many ways, the person he trusted most. That dynamic gave her enormous influence, but it also came with expectations that would shape the rest of her life. Inside the Trump organization, Ivanka quickly proved that she wasn't there to sit quietly in the corner office. She took charge of major projects, from skyscraper developments in Manhattan to international real estate deals. Her presence changed the tone of the boardroom. She was polished, strategic, and often the calming force when her father's temper flared. But those close to the family say that her influence went much deeper than project management. Ivanka was one of the few people who could challenge Donald Trump behind closed doors, offering advice and, at times, redirecting his instincts when they could lead to disaster. Still, her closeness to her father made some executives uneasy. Former employees have described the Trump organization as a place where loyalty was currency, and Ivanka had more of it than anyone. If she didn't trust you, you could find yourself sidelined overnight. And there were whispers that Ivanka was quietly consolidating power, ensuring that she and not her brothers would one day inherit the lion's share of the family empire. Donald Trump himself seemed to place her on a pedestal. He often praised her publicly, calling her smart and beautiful, and many observers noticed that he relied on her opinion more than that of any advisor. But this dynamic also created tension with her siblings, particularly Donald Jr. and Eric, who were seen as competing for their father's attention and approval. Some insiders suggest that Ivanka's ability to stay calm, appear neutral, and build alliances behind the scenes gave her an edge over skill that would later prove invaluable in politics. After Ivanka solidified her position within the Trump organization and became one of the company's most influential players, her personal life also came under intense scrutiny. In 2009, she married Jared Kushner, heir to a major real estate empire and a man with strong political connections. Their union was considered a true power match. Together, they merged two fortunes and two networks of influence, creating an impenetrable circle around themselves. Jared became not only a partner in her personal life, but also a key ally in Ivanka's strategic decisions. And when Donald Trump announced his intention to run for president, it was this unity and ability to act as a team that helped Ivanka and Jared secure a special place in the future administration. From that moment, their lives changed forever, and the stakes reached unprecedented heights. When Donald Trump entered the White House in January 2017, the world watched with fascination and no small amount of skepticism. But behind the scenes, one figure was already quietly shaping the new administration: Ivanka Trump. Unlike most presidential children, Ivanka didn't just make ceremonial appearances. She became a senior advisor to the president, wielding real influence in the most powerful office in the world. From the beginning, Ivanka's presence in the West Wing was controversial. She had no prior government experience, yet she was given access to the highest levels of decision-making. Officially, her role was to focus on issues like women's empowerment and job creation, but those inside the administration knew her influence went far beyond that. Former White House staffers have claimed that Ivanka was often in the room for sensitive discussions on foreign policy and economic strategy, weighing in on matters that would affect millions of Americans. Her office, located just steps from the Oval Office, became a hub for behind-the-scenes meetings. Diplomats, CEOs, and lawmakers all sought an audience with Ivanka, believing she could sway her father in ways no one else could. And sometimes, they were right. Multiple sources have described moments when Donald Trump was leaning one way on a major decision, only to shift after a private conversation with Ivanka. Whether she was tempering his impulses or advancing her own agenda is still a matter of debate. But Ivanka's influence came at a price. Critics accused her of blurring the lines between family and government, raising questions about conflicts of interest. Her fashion brand continued to operate during her time in the White House, leading to allegations that she was using her position for personal gain. There were reports of Chinese trademarks granted to her company, while she was involved in diplomatic negotiations with Beijing, a coincidence that left many wondering where business ended and politics began. The scrutiny intensified as the Trump administration became engulfed in scandals. While Ivanka maintained her trademark composure in public, insiders say she was deeply aware of how the controversies could damage her carefully cultivated image. She began to distance herself from some of the more polarizing figures in her father's inner circle, even as she and Jared consolidated their own power. Still, Ivanka's role was not without substance. She was instrumental in pushing for paid family leave policies and tax credits for working families, initiatives that won her praise from moderates. But even these accomplishments were viewed through a political lens. Was Ivanka truly motivated by policy, or were these efforts part of a larger strategy to build a reputation separate from her father's? The truth is that Ivanka's time in the White House raised more questions than it answered. How much power did she really have? How often did she act as a moderating voice? And how often was she quietly advancing her own interests? And perhaps most importantly, what was she planning for the future once her father left office? One thing was clear: Ivanka Trump was no longer just a businesswoman or a political advisor. She had become one of the most enigmatic and polarizing figures in American politics, and her next move could change everything. By the time Ivanka Trump had settled into her role in the White House, the controversies surrounding her were impossible to ignore. While she continued to present herself as a polished and composed figure, the world around her was brimming with questions about her true intentions. Every public appearance was dissected, every business move scrutinized, and every personal connection questioned. For someone who had spent her life mastering the art of image control, the pressure was relentless. One of the first major scandals to erupt involved her business empire. While Ivanka had announced she was stepping back from day-to-day management of her brand, her company still operated during her tenure as a senior advisor. Reports emerged that her fashion line had received Chinese trademarks around the same time she participated in trade negotiations with Beijing. Critics were quick to point out the glaring conflict of interest. Was Ivanka using her government position to secure lucrative deals for her company? The allegations, though never proven, cast a shadow over her credibility. Then there were the ethics questions surrounding her use of a personal email account for government business, a controversy that drew uncomfortable comparisons to Hillary Clinton, whose emails had been a central focus of her father's 2016 campaign. Ivanka insisted that she had never sent classified information and that she was fully compliant with record-keeping laws, but the optics were damaging. It fed a narrative that she operated by a different set of rules that didn't apply to everyone else. The criticism didn't stop there. Ivanka and Jared's prominent roles in the administration led to accusations of nepotism, with detractors arguing that they were unqualified for the positions they held. Former White House staffers described a culture where officials were wary of crossing the couple, fearing the consequences. Some even alleged that Ivanka had quietly pushed out rivals and critics, consolidating her power in ways that echoed the corporate maneuvers she had mastered at the Trump Organization. But perhaps the most damaging controversies were the ones tied to global politics. Questions swirled about Jared's business dealings with foreign investors while he was serving as a senior advisor. Reports suggested that some of these investors believed they could use their relationships with Jared and Ivanka to gain access to the president. While no hard evidence ever surfaced linking Ivanka to any wrongdoing, the perception that she and her husband were profiting from their positions was difficult to shake. Publicly, Ivanka remained composed. She spoke in carefully measured tones, never revealing frustration, never engaging in the chaos that seemed to define much of the administration. But insiders say that behind closed doors, she was acutely aware of how the scandals threatened her future. she began to take even greater care in managing her image, choosing her appearances selectively and avoiding entanglement in her father's most explosive controversies. Yet, even as she distanced herself from the chaos, questions about her true motives grew louder. Was Ivanka the moderating voice in the White House, as her supporters claim? Or was she quietly leveraging her position to build her own network of power, preparing for a future in which the Trump name might no longer hold the same sway? One thing was certain: the scandals that surrounded Ivanka during her time in Washington would follow her long after she left the Capitol. And as her father's presidency came to a close, the world was left wondering, what would Ivanka Trump do next? And how far was she willing to go to protect everything she had built? When Donald Trump's presidency ended, Ivanka Trump was at a crossroads. For 4 years, she had operated at the highest levels of American politics, with access to world leaders, billionaires, and the kind of information most people could never dream of. But the end of the administration didn't just mark the end of a chapter. It exposed questions about her future and the empire she had quietly built behind the scenes. Ivanka and Jared moved to Florida, purchasing a massive property on the exclusive billionaire's Bunker Island near Miami. Publicly, they presented this as a chance to step back from politics and focus on their family. But insiders claimed that the move was strategic, a way to reposition themselves away from the controversies swirling around Washington, while still staying close enough to maintain influence. Their presence in Florida placed them at the center of a network of powerful donors and political figures, many of whom were already speculating about Donald Trump's next move, and by extension, Ivanka's. As she transitioned out of public office, Ivanka's business dealings came under renewed scrutiny. Her fashion brand, once a staple in major department stores, had been shuttered in 2018 amid declining sales and public boycotts. Yet whispers persisted that Ivanka was quietly investing in new ventures through shell companies and private equity deals. Former associates claimed that she had learned to operate more discreetly, using layers of intermediaries to distance herself from controversial projects. There were also rumors of international investments, particularly in the Middle East and Asia. Jared Kushner had developed close ties to Saudi Arabia during his time in the White House, and reports later revealed that his investment firm had received a massive $2 billion commitment from the Saudi Sovereign Wealth Fund. Though Ivanka's direct involvement was never confirmed, many questioned whether she, too, was benefiting from these lucrative relationships. Critics argued that these deals were the clearest example yet of how the couple's political power had translated into personal enrichment. At the same time, Ivanka appeared to be testing the waters of a political comeback. She made selective appearances at high-profile events, carefully curated to maintain her image as a poised and capable leader. Some Republican strategists quietly floated her name as a potential candidate for Senate or governor in Florida, believing she could leverage her brand to win over suburban voters. Yet Ivanka remained non-committal, perhaps wary of the relentless scrutiny that had defined her time in Washington. But the scandals didn't stop following her. Investigative journalists uncovered new details about the Trump Organization's finances, and while Ivanka was never directly accused of wrongdoing, her signature appeared on key documents tied to questionable accounting practices. There were also renewed investigations into whether she and Jared had failed to properly disclose certain foreign assets while serving in the White House. Though no charges were brought, the headlines were damaging, feeding the perception that Ivanka was adept at staying just one step ahead of accountability. Those who know Ivanka say she has become even more private since leaving Washington. She avoids the spotlight, rarely grants interviews, and speaks only in carefully controlled statements. But behind that silence, her network continues to grow. She and Jared have reportedly invested in tech startups, luxury real estate developments, and even cryptocurrency ventures, using their vast wealth to position themselves for the next phase of their lives. The question is, what is that next phase? Some believe Ivanka is simply waiting for the right moment to re-enter public life, possibly with a political career of her own. Others suspect she's content to operate in the shadows, quietly building an empire that doesn't require the constant media attention her father craves. Whatever the truth, one thing is clear. Ivanka Trump remains one of the most enigmatic figures in American public life. Because while she may no longer stand at her father's side in the Oval Office, Ivanka's influence is far from over. Her connections span continents, her resources are virtually limitless, and her ability to reinvent herself has been proven time and time again. But for all her calculated moves, there's a lingering question she has never been able to fully escape: how much of her success was built on her own merit, and how much was built on the access and opportunities afforded by her family name. The world may never know the full extent of the deals made behind closed doors, the favors exchanged, and the alliances formed during her time in the Trump orbit. But as history continues to unfold, one thing remains certain: Ivanka Trump is not finished. She is playing a long game, and if her past is any indication, her next move could be the most surprising and the most consequential yet.